Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. A huge thank you to ArcSoul for the virtual gift voucher. Big thank you, my friends, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. But on to today. Man, what a couple of days. Not only did I read Hell's Reach for the first time within like a day and a half, but then we get the motherload of all announcements. And my hype level just went through the roof. This is major. The return of the Silent King. And why is it major? Well, we're going to talk about that today, and just who is the Silent King, and why is his return so important, and what are his intentions. Oh yes, general spoiler warning here obviously, as we are going to be talking about lore history and a little bit of current timeline discussion too, which kind of goes without saying, but you have been warned. Now, the history of the Necrons spans millions of years, and to know Szarekh, the last Silent King, we have to take a bit of a journey back to this time when the Necrons was still a race of flesh and blood, named the Necrontyr. The Necrontyr were a very successful race and quickly found themselves having a growing empire across the stars. The rulers of the Necrontyr were the Triarch, a council of 3 pharaohs. Think a futuristic version of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. And the greatest of these 3 was named the Silent King. To oppose him, to defy him, to disobey him, all meant absolute death. Now, why the title of Silent King? Well, it was a tradition for the Silent King to never speak. A god doesn't lower themselves to speak with the menials. And it was the duty of the other Triarch pharaohs to issue his rulings and proclamations. Ultimately, however, as the Necrontyr continued to expand, the Triarch found it harder and harder to maintain control, and wars began to escalate between the various pharaohs and their dynasties, which became known as the First War of Secession. In a desperate gamble to unify the race once more, the Triarch declared war on the race of the Old Ones, perhaps the most powerful race the galaxy had ever seen, who had refused to share their secrets of long life with the Necrontyr. The War in Heaven. And the War in Heaven ripped across the entire galaxy, but left the Necrontyr very much on the losing end. And it was during this time that Szarekh inherited the position of Silent King. And timing couldn't have been much worse for Szarekh. The Empire was crumbling due to the Long War, and a second War of Secession was all but on the cards. And then came the C'tan, star-feeding beings of godlike power, offering power not only to defeat the Old Ones, but to the long-wished-for gift of immortality. It's said that Szarekh and the Triarch debated their offer for over a year, but ultimately, in his desperation to stop his race from tearing themselves apart, or perhaps the lust for immortality, Szarekh accepted the C'tan's offer. And so the Necrontyr's transference to the Necrons began. Bodies of flesh and blood replaced with living metal. Whether they wished for it or not, all Necrontyr were bound by Szarekh's rule. But only too late did Szarekh realise his mistake, and the sin he had committed against his people. He had cost them their souls to hungering gods. And so the last Silent King began to form his plan for revenge. Possessed not only of an immortal body of immense power, Szarekh now had command protocols over the entire race of Necrons. They could not refuse him even if they wanted, and though in time he grew to resent it, it enabled him to execute his plan to perfection. At the culmination of the war in heaven, as the Necrons and Catan destroyed the Old Ones, Szarekh seized his moment and unleashed the wrath of the Necrons against the Catan, shattering them into shards and imprisoning the Star Gods. But at an almighty cost. The Necron race had been all but shattered, and he alone remained of the Triarch. Knowing their time was over, Szarekh issued his final command. With the building of immense tombs across the dynasties, he ordered an entire race to enter the Great Sleep, to remain in hibernation, if you will, for 60 million years. And then, once all their remaining enemies had long died, the Necrons would reawaken and restore their might. Leaving his Praetorians to guard his slumbering people, Szarekh severed his command protocol and entered a self-imposed exile into the galactic void. When his people eventually emerged to reclaim their birthright, they would do so as their own masters. And like the pharaohs of old, who upon their death would take everything they needed into the next world, so too did Szarekh. Upon his own black as night ship, the size of a moon, he took the legions of his own dynasty. For all his sins, he was still the Silent King, unmatched in his power and grandeur. And, as we know, that's where it remained for many years. Millions of years within the lore. Until out in the expanse of nothingness, Szarekh encountered the approaching Tyranids, and realised if they stripped all life from the galaxy, all hope would be lost for his slumbering people. Szarekh doesn't care anything for the living people of the galaxy. He cares nothing for their culture, their way of life, but he needs life if there's ever hope for the Necrons to return to be flesh and blood. And so Szarekh returned to the galaxy and found it in turmoil. Worst of all, the barriers the Necrons had put in place to keep the warp at bay have been broken, and it seeped across the galaxy. Lesser races swarmed like ants over their former empire, and the sleeping dynasties were only awakening in pieces. And while he has been acting in secret, guiding dynasties and his people from the shadows, the time has clearly come for the last Silent King to make himself known once again. And oh man, am I excited for this. We've got the rightful ruler of the entire Necron race on a Death Star filled to the brim with his own legions of warriors. Oh man, is this going to be good. But the question is, why now? Is a larger Tyranid fleet forcing his hand? Perhaps we're about to be hit by the greatest hive fleet yet seen, meaning Szarekh has no time for niceties and acting from shadows. His hand has been forced. Or more likely, has the warp spilling out across the galaxy threatened too many of his slumbering people? Have the actions of the lesser races forced his hand in having to take action himself? If he doesn't act now, the mess they are making, it may be too late. But the really interesting thing is just how will the Silent King go about reunifying the Necrons? Let's not forget he has severed the command protocols. Sure, his Praetorians have been spreading his word, but is it enough? Could we see another war of secession? There's an interesting quote from Imhotep the Stormlord. I have heard rumours of the Silent King's return. They are unworthy of a real ruler. Creeping through the darkness, playing shadow games through puppets. No true king acts this way. And if the tales are true, then he will learn his time is long since over. So it's pretty clear not all dynasties will bow to their former ruler. Is the Silent King in for a rude awakening? Or is Imhotep about to get curb-stomped by the one true Pharaoh? Oh my lord, I can't wait for this. The story potential is absolutely awesome. I really hope we're going to get a novel to go with this. It's about time for a Wolf Lord dynasty to awaken, I think. I knew I should have got that Necron battle force. But what do you guys think? What are your thoughts? What is going to go down? Why is Szarekh removing himself from the shadows now? What has forced his hand? As always, drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love to read them. A huge thank you to all my subscribers. Your support really means a lot to me. It truly does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? But with that said, I'm off, and I'll see you all again real soon.